Welcome to Replenish the Atmosphere of Discovery, where we discover the Master's plan for our lives. So today's session is on grief. So grief is the emotion from the experience of losing something or someone. Okay, so any loss or absence of a favorite pet, a job, a friendship, a relationship, an expectation, or even a hope can cause you grief. Okay. So in any area of our lives, we can be experiencing or grieving multiple losses in different areas. Okay. And more often than not, we often ignore the process and we fail to mourn in a healthy way. So mourning is the process that you go through to adapt and become accustomed to your loss. Bereavement is characterized by grief and mourning, right? But that is the loss that you feel, that process, that period of time that you are feeling that loss, okay? And your loss can sometimes lead to psychological and physiological debilitating symptoms when not managed and monitored properly. Okay, so as we discuss the changes that we are making and experiencing during the process of discovering God's plan, we do not want to leave out the process of grieving. So there are some things, some people, some habits, some mindsets that we must lose or let go of if we're truly going to stick with the changes that we are making, right? And so the characteristics and people that have become part of our identity can sometimes be hard or become hard to release, right? So not only do you have to separate yourself from what you've always known, okay, but you have to find the attachments that it has to other areas of your thinking and the way you feel in order to not get caught in the same familiar cycles without realizing it, right? So if the way that you feel about a certain thing is attached to a person. When you let that person go, you'll find yourself at a decision, right? Do you go with the familiar or do you discover a new way to feel? Do you discover a new way to think, a new way to act, right? Because sometimes we can get caught in that cycle just because this way of thinking or this way of feeling has become a habit. But we have to learn what else are those things that I'm letting go of? What else in my life is that thing or that person attached to that I need to adjust as well? Okay, so you have voluntary grief where you have chosen to remove something or someone for your benefit, right? And then you have involuntary grief where something or someone leaves or dies without your consent, without preparation, and without your benefit, right? So there's two forms. You have the voluntary form of grief and the involuntary form of grief. Most of us deal with involuntary grief more than voluntary, right? Because we have a hard time letting things and people go before, you get to that stage where it's detrimental to you. So we've all lost someone or something without warning and without our consent, right? How did you process that? Did you process that in anger, in sadness, and fear? Was any of those emotions paralyzing where it stopped you from living? Right? So grief, which is deep sorrow and sadness, it can be visible or invisible. Okay, sometimes we don't see it because it's masked very well. We ignore it, we don't want to feel it, so we push it down. But grief is caused by the loss of something or someone important to you, right? So it may not be important to anybody else, but anything that you lose or that goes away from you or that dies, if it is important to you, that's what grief is caused by. It's important to even understand that with children, that their experience with grief may be the loss of a favorite toy, right? A pet, a schoolyard friend. Okay. Children experience grief. And it's important that we show them how to process that at a young age so that as they get older, they do not form these debilitating symptoms and mental disorders and issues because they fail to grieve properly. Okay. So as children, that's where we learn the grieving process, right? If you were told to forget about whatever you lost, that's not healthy, right? Because you're not going to forget just because someone tells you to forget. If you were, let's say you're grieving the loss of your favorite toy, it broke or something, right? And you just got a new toy. That's not healthy either. Okay, because then as you become an adult, when someone dies, you keep expecting a new one to pop up, right? So we have to think about how we're forming these ideas and these methods and these mindsets into our children. Okay, when you lose something or someone, there's no replacement. It's simply another beneficial addition to your life. Okay, you don't use additions as replacements or substitutions. Okay, when you are grieving, you don't use additions as replacements or substitutions. You don't use another person to substitute for what you lost. They just become an addition. Okay, you don't use someone as a replacement for what you've lost. They just become an addition. Okay, and this is important as you think about grief because it is unfair to expect someone or something to match what you've already had. Okay, that's unfair to that person. Okay, so you have to get to the point of acceptance no matter what you are grieving so that you don't completely check out mentally. You have to get to a point of acceptance during the grieving process. That's what you're going toward, that's what you're aiming for. Never grieving a loss can lead to mental disorders. It can lead to substance abuse and serious health issues, right? It can affect you physically in your body. And again, grief is not just for losing people. You can grieve from any personal loss, whether it's platonic or romantic, in a relationship. You can grieve a loss of an idea that failed. You can grieve the loss of a special pet, your favorite object. You can grieve from an illness, failed or delayed dreams and goals, certain comforts. You can grieve from old identities, right? So that's why I'm bringing this up so that we learn how to properly grieve and give ourselves the grace and the space to fulfill that process, okay? Grief is also another cause for emotional instability, right? Grief is described as your response to a loss. So even though we tend to focus on the emotional response to a loss, it can also have physical, behavioral, social, cultural, cognitive, and spiritual responses, right? Grief is a response to the death of anything or anyone that you have had a connection with. Okay, so there can be a deep sadness that take place, right? And everyone processes that differently, but the key is to process that, right? Some of the feelings that are described is intense sadness, shock or numbness, right? Denial and anger. These are some of the feelings that you will feel as you are processing grief, right? And with grief, the only way to deal with it is to go through it, not around it. Okay, if you're going around it, you're suppressing something and it's going to come out at some point, right? Accept the reality of your loss and begin the process of adjusting to your world without that thing or that person that you have lost. Okay, and going through this process can be emotionally draining because you must process multiple emotions and feelings depending on how often it comes up until you learn how to live your life with the changes that have made, with the changes from this absence. Okay. And certain behavior therapies can help by making you aware of your negative thinking patterns, right? During that process that can cause you difficulty, right? As you grieve. So it is natural to seek comfort and distraction from your grief. Okay. This must be done in a way that is not harmful to you or others. You still have to keep in mind that you still have to live. Okay. And you cannot grieve in a way or whatever conference you're seeking, whatever distractions you're seeking, cannot be in a way where it is detrimental to you or someone else. You do not want to harm other people emotionally because you've substituted them as a coping mechanism and you plan to drop them as soon as you feel better, right? We are not promoting you emotionally abusing people just because you're grieving, okay? Some people experience grief suddenly or tragically. Okay. And others, although they may be aware that someone or something is close to leaving them, still take it just as hard. And so this is a process that you must go through mentally, emotionally, and sometimes even spiritually. Okay. So it isn't beneficial to be in denial about your loss because it can lead to other delusions. Listen, the enemy does not care who you lose. Okay. He will use that as a door to cause you to be delusional, to introduce insanity to you, to introduce bipolar and schizophrenia. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about how you feel. Okay. And we have to be aware of that. And so, in cases where grief is due to the potential death of a loved one, where people are on life support, can be especially difficult because there is the matter of hope and faith, there is divine purpose, and there is the will of the person that is unconscious. I want you to understand this because we have a lot of people that blame God if someone doesn't come back. There's three things that you must think about. There's the matter of your hope and faith, right? There is divine purpose, the will of God, and then there is the will of the person that is unconscious, okay? It is helpful to know the will of the person before they are in that condition. If you know that person has told you, listen, I don't want to live as a vegetable, I don't want to be a burden to anybody, you honor their request, right? You don't leave them here in a shell where they cannot live. That's very selfish. And sometimes we are very selfish people, right? If a person desires to consider the end of life when they can no longer think and breathe from themselves and do not want the help of machines to continue life, it is their decision. And again, it is selfish of those left behind to make an alternative decision. Okay. Divine purpose is the second consideration, right? What is the will of God for this person? What if this person comes back and they commit a sin and then they're taken out of here? And instead of going to heaven, if they were to leave in that state, now they go to hell. What is God's will for this person? The third consideration is based on your hope and faith. So if it is God's will that they return and they desire to live, believing in the power of God will cause life to be sustained. Okay. Quite often, we don't recognize the difference between being pronounced medically brain dead, meaning there's no brain activity at all, and simply being unconscious, which is in a coma or vegetative state, right? In a brain dead person, the machines are mechanically keeping the tissues and organs alive by continuing to pump blood through the circulation system. But this is not proof that the person is alive. Okay? A person needs not just the blood to move, but they need brain function and they need a spirit to live. Medical science cannot duplicate the spirit of a man with the machine. It can only move the blood. The body needs a spirit to live. And I've experienced this where someone was on a machine, brain dead, and I've seen their spirit sit up in that bed and look at everybody around them crying. And yes, people prayed, right? And they believed, but the spirit was already gone. It was just the machine keeping the blood moving so that the body, the flesh, was still alive, but the spirit was already gone. And it's important that we understand this, right? So whether we are talking about physical loss or emotional loss, work towards the reality of your loss and experience the pain to learn how it feels to miss what you've lost. Again, this loss can refer to the end of a friendship, the end of a relationship, the end of a career, any kind of experience where there is a sudden absence of something, whether it was voluntary, you said, hey, I have to end this relationship. I have to get a new job. I have to change location, right? I have to get rid of this idea. I have to get rid of this mindset, no matter what the loss is, okay? When you have accepted your loss, you can begin the process of adjusting to your new reality. And a lot of people stay stuck in the stage of shock, right? But you have to get to the place where you've accepted that you've lost something, that this thing or this person is no longer there, and you begin to adjust to your new reality. This does not mean that you forget if it's someone you lose in death. This does not mean that you forget the deceased or forget the thing or forget your experiences, right? But you remember them while also validating what you are experiencing now in their loss. Okay. When you grieve, You are quite possibly not looking at things through the lens of truth, okay, but through pain. Okay. As you go through the process, the truth will become evident. But during the first part of acknowledgement, you may just see everything through the lens of pain or sadness. Okay. Your focus goes to trying to find answers or someone to blame versus processing what you're feeling. And you may shift your focus and blame for multiple reasons, but don't confuse someone not knowing how to support you during this time with them not wanting to support you. So there's a difference in people not knowing in what ways they can support you and them just choosing not to. Okay, the focus should be on your process. Okay, focusing on anything and anybody else is just avoidance and prolonging that process that you need to get through to accepting what your life will be now with that loss. So as we discuss grief, some of us may have to go back further than others to process correctly, to bring to life a healthy way of managing our emotions and our feelings related to our experiences with losses of different kinds. Okay. And this helps us in the future, right? To not be stuck with things that should have been dealt with or at a standstill at our lives, or a fear of receiving new additions, not replacements and substitution. If you feel you have replaced or substituted those losses, you will be stuck at one part of the grieving process that will keep popping up, knocking on your emotions until it is fully handled. Now, for the stuff that you're letting go of that wasn't beneficial to you, you are restoring harmony and balance. So it is a recovery and a restoration of self back to your original design. Okay, so here's the process. And I know typically people say that the first thing is denial, but that, like I said, is an open door to delusion, right? Because you're not accepting the truth, which can create psychological issues. So, number one, acknowledging the loss, which means you are acknowledging your feelings associated with the loss: anger, fear, sadness, frustration, hopelessness, distress, anguish, right? You are acknowledging your feelings associated with your loss. And then you find healthy ways to allow those feelings to be resolved, along with accepting the feelings that won't go away, right? The feelings that won't go away is you missing certain moments and feelings that you've had, right? The love won't go away. The care won't go away. The admiration, the support, that may not, that those are feelings that won't go away. Okay. And you have to start accepting that, right? You're going to always love this person, right? You're going to always feel the admiration that you had for them. Okay. And the other thing is discovering and adjusting to your life with the absence. If you fail to see your life prospering or you fail to see a future, you will remain stuck in that moment. Okay. And then you'll just be in survival mode until the day that you close your eyes. So although years pass, you never evolve, you never prosper, and you never fulfill your destiny because you're just stuck in that place. Okay. So we have object, emotion, location, and people voids when we experience a loss. These are all areas we can be grieving. Okay. The process for those voluntary areas we are grieving is not the place for substitutions or replacements. Okay. It is the place for restoration and recovery, going back to your original design. Okay. And for those involuntary griefs that we must bear them with grace for ourselves and grace for the process. Okay. You can have closure with great memories and moments to cherish versus killing parts of you to hold on to the presence of that thing or that person that is no longer there. The presence is no longer there. And so you have to deal with and see your life with that absence, still keeping those precious moments and those memories and the love and the support that you have received. Those are things that won't go away, right? But the sadness will go away. Okay. The anger will go away. The frustration will go away eventually, right? But there are things that time even with time, still will not go away. I hope that whatever you are deciding to let go of, whatever, maybe you set some boundaries and some people have crossed that boundary, so you're having to let go of them. You have to begin to grieve their absence. Okay. You have to go through the whole process. You go through what you feel, go through it. Don't go around it, because it will still come up eventually. Okay. So I wanted to give you some insight on how to grieve properly in a way that is healthy, where you will come out whole and complete, okay, for the most part. And the time frame of it is solely on you, because it depends on what all you have to process, right? But if you're going 2 years and you're still feeling the exact same emotions related to the loss, that is not healthy. Okay. If your life has completely stopped and you 2 years in limbo, that is not healthy. Okay. So I hope that you all were blessed on today. I hope that you're seeing in some ways that you may not have grieved some losses properly. And that's why that keeps coming up. That's why you keep getting triggers, because it's your brain's way of alerting you that, hey, you haven't dealt with this yet. Okay. And it could be 10 years, 20 years. It could be things, 40 years ago that's still coming up. And that's your brain's way of telling you, hey, this needs to be dealt with. This is still inside of you. You're still suffering from this. Just continue to do what needs to be done to discover the master's plan for your life. In his plan, you will experience losses. You will, might be some ideas that you've had, some goals that you've had that will derail you, that will take you away from his plan. So you have to, get rid of those. You might have to grieve that. Some things doesn't take a long time. You accept it and you just move on. But other things, and right, it's dependent upon you, how you experience it. Other things may take longer to grieve. Okay. So God bless you all, and I will see you all next Friday at 3 o'clock.